The rain came down in sheets, each drop a cold slap against Lily's face as she stood on the cracked sidewalk outside the only home she'd ever known. Her mother's words still echoed in her ears. Sharp and venomous. "You're a parasite. Lily, you've drained me dry. And I'm done." The door had slammed shut. The sound final, like the closing of a coffin. At 19, Lily was cast out, her meager belongings stuffed into a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The weight of it felt heavier than it should, as if it carried not just clothes but the shards of her broken trust. She didn't look back. Not when the thunder rolled. Not when the lights in the house flickered off, leaving her in darkness. Her mother, Ellen, had always been a storm, unpredictable, fierce, and capable of tearing through everything in her path. For years, Lily had tried to weather it, to be the dutiful daughter who cleaned up the messes, who nodded through the insults, who believed love could mend what resentment had broken. But tonight, something had snapped. Ellen's rage, fueled by years of bitterness and a bottle of cheap wine, had reached its peak, and Lily was the casualty. The town of Ashwood was small, its streets familiar but unkind under the weight of Lily's new reality. She trudged toward the only place she could think to go, the 24-hour diner on the edge of town, where the neon sign buzzed faintly against the night. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and grease, a comforting contrast to the sterile cruelty of her mother's house. She slid into a booth, her soaked clothes clinging to her skin, and ordered a coffee she couldn't afford. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a kind smile, slid the cup over without a word about payment. Lily gripped it, letting the warmth seep into her hands, grounding her. She had nothing. No money, no plan, no one to call. Her father had left when she was 5, a shadow in her memory, and her mother's family was a tangle of estrangements and grudges. Friends. Lily had kept them at arm's length, too ashamed of her mother's outbursts to let anyone close. The diner's hum was her only companion now, the clink of dishes and low murmur of late-night regulars, a fragile tether to the world. But in that moment, something stirred in Lily's spark, faint but unyielding. She wasn't a parasite. She wasn't nothing. She'd spent her life shrinking to fit her mother's expectations, swallowing her own dreams to keep the peace. No more. The pain of rejection burned, but it also lit a fire. She would survive this. She would build something of her own, something her mother could never take away. The next morning, Lily used the last of her cash to buy a bus ticket to the city. An hour away. She'd heard of shelters there, places that might offer a bed and a chance to start over. The ride was quiet, her reflection in the window a ghostly reminder of the girl she'd been. She thought of her mother's face, twisted with anger, and the accusations that had cut deeper than any knife. Parasite. Useless. Burden. Each word was a weight, but Lily vowed to cast them off. In the city, she found a shelter run by a woman named Clara, whose warmth was a stark contrast to Ellen's coldness. Clara didn't pry, didn't judge. She gave Lily a cot, a hot meal, and a list of job openings. "You're stronger than you know," Clara said, her voice steady. "You just need a chance to prove it." Lily clung to those words, repeating them like a mantra as she faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life. Her first job was at a corner store, stocking shelves for minimum wage. It was grueling, the hours long and the pay barely enough to cover a shared room in a rundown apartment. But Lily didn't complain. She showed up early, stayed late, and learned every task with a quiet determination. Her coworkers noticed her boss, too. Within months, she was promoted to cashier, then assistant manager. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Each paycheck was a brick in the foundation of a life she was building from nothing. At night, when the city hummed outside her window, Lily studied. She'd always loved numbers, the way they fit together like pieces of a puzzle. In high school, she dreamed of studying accounting, but her mother had scoffed, calling it a waste of time. Now, with no one to hold her back, Lily enrolled in night classes at a community college. She pored over textbooks, her eyes burning from exhaustion. But she didn't stop. Every equation solved, every concept mastered, was a step toward proving her mother wrong. 2 years passed in a blur of work and study. Lily's life was small, but hers friends made it the college. A tiny apartment she could call her own. A sense of purpose that grew stronger each day. She didn't think of her mother often, but when she did, the pain was still there, sharp and raw. Ellen had taken everything from her home, her security, her sense of worth. But Lily was taking it back, piece by piece, and she wasn't done yet. Lily's life in the city was a testament to her resilience, but it wasn't without its cracks. There were nights when exhaustion weighed heavier than her textbooks, when the memory of her mother's voice crept into her dreams, accusing her of failure. She pushed through, driven by a quiet fury that refused to let Ellen's words define her. The community college became her sanctuary, a place where her efforts were seen, where her potential wasn't dismissed. Her professors noticed her dedication, one even recommending her for a scholarship that covered her final semester. It was a small victory, but to Lily, it felt like a shout into the void. I am here, and I am enough. By the end of her second year, Lily had earned her associate's degree in accounting. It wasn't a grand achievement in the eyes of the world, but for a girl who'd been called a parasite, it was everything. She framed the diploma and hung it on the wall of her tiny apartment, a reminder of what she'd built from the ashes of her past. Her job at the corner store had evolved. She was now managing the books, streamlining inventory, and catching errors that had slipped through for years. Her boss, Mr. Chun, trusted her implicitly, often saying, "Lily, you're the best thing that's happened to this place." But the past has a way of clawing its way back. One gray morning, as Lily sipped coffee in her apartment, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Her heart sank as she read it. "Lily, it's Mom. I need to see you. Please." The words were a jolt, pulling her back to that rainy night 2 years ago. She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to keep the distance she'd fought so hard to maintain. But another part, the part that still remembered her mother's rare moments of kindness, the fleeting smiles between storm-sculled let go. She agreed to meet Ellen at a cafe in Ashwood, a neutral ground that felt safer than the house where she'd been cast out. When Lily arrived, she barely recognized her mother. Ellen's face was gaunt, her eyes sunken, her once imposing presence diminished. She looked older than her 50 years, worn down by something Lily couldn't yet name. "I'm sorry," Ellen said, her voice trembling. "I was wrong. I was angry, and I took it out on you." Lily listened, her heart a battlefield of emotions. She wanted to believe the apology, to see it as a bridge to healing. But the words felt hollow, too late to undo the damage. Ellen spoke of struggles, a lost job, mounting debts, a life unraveling. She didn't ask for forgiveness outright, but the plea was there, in the way her hands shook as she clutched her coffee cup. Lily felt a pang of pity, but it was tangled with anger. This was the woman who'd called her worthless, who'd thrown her out into the rain. Could she trust this version of her mother? She left the cafe with no promises, only a vague agreement to stay in touch. Back in the city, Lily threw herself into her work and studies, trying to outrun the questions Ellen's reappearance had stirred. Was her mother truly sorry? Or was this another manipulation? She didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. But she had her own life now, and she wouldn't let it crumble for anyone, not even Ellen. Months later, Lily landed an internship at a small accounting firm, a step toward the career she dreamed of. The work was demanding, the learning curve steep, but she thrived. Her colleagues respected her, and her supervisor praised her attention to detail. For the first time, Lily felt like she belonged somewhere, like her efforts mattered. She saved every penny she could, dreaming of a future where she'd never have to rely on anyone again. But Ellen's messages kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. She needed money, a place to stay, a chance to make things right. Lily ignored most of them, but the guilt was a constant shadow. She remembered Clara's words from the shelter, "You're stronger than you know." She clung to that strength, but it wavered when she thought of her mother, alone and struggling. Was she cruel for keeping her distance? Or was she protecting the life she'd fought so hard to build? One evening, as Lily balanced the firm's books, she stumbled across a discrepancy that led her to a discovery: her mother's name, listed as a client in an old file. Ellen had been involved in a failed business venture, one that had left her with debts she couldn't pay. The pieces clicked together: her mother's desperation, her sudden outreach. Lily's heart hardened. This wasn't just about reconciliation. Ellen needed something from her, just as she always had. The discovery of Ellen's name in the firm's files was a turning point for Lily. It wasn't just a name on a page. It was a map of her mother's failures, a ledger of broken promises and unpaid debts. The business Venturia small boutique Ellen had opened years ago had collapsed under mismanagement and reckless spending. The file detailed creditors circling like vultures, and Lily realized her mother's pleas weren't born of remorse, but of desperation. She wasn't seeking a daughter. She was seeking a lifeline. Lily wrestled with what to do. Part of her wanted to confront Ellen, to demand answers for the years of pain, for the night she'd been thrown out like trash. But another part urged caution. She wasn't the scared girl from 2 years ago. She had knowledge now, skills, a path forward. If Ellen thought she could manipulate her again, she was mistaken. She threw herself into her internship, channeling her anger into precision. The accounting firm was a pressure cooker, with deadlines looming and clients demanding perfection. Lily didn't just meet expectations, she exceeded them. She caught errors in spreadsheets that had been overlooked for months, earning her supervisor's respect and a promise of a full-time position after her internship ended. Her colleagues began to rely on her, and for the first time, Lily felt a sense of community, of being valued for who she was, not what she could give. But Ellen's messages didn't stop. They grew more frantic, laced with guilt trips. "I'm your mother. Lily, don't turn your back on me." Lily read them in silence, her jaw tight. She didn't owe Ellen anything, not after the years of verbal abuse, not after being called a parasite. Yet the pull of family, however broken, was hard to ignore. She confided in Clara, who'd become a mentor over the years. "You can't fix her," Clara said gently, "but you can protect what you've built." Lily took the advice to heart. She stopped responding to Ellen's messages, focusing instead on her own goals. She enrolled in a bachelor's program, juggling classes with her internship. The workload was brutal, but Lily thrived on it. Each challenge was a chance to prove herself, to show the world and her mother that she was more than the labels Ellen had pinned on her. One day, while sorting through old files at the firm, Lily found something that stopped her cold, a document tied to her mother's house. Ellen had taken out a second mortgage years ago, one she'd defaulted on. The bank was moving to foreclose, and the house, the one Lily had been kicked out of, was at risk. The realization hit like a punch. That house, for all its pain, was the only tangible piece of her childhood. Losing it to Ellen's recklessness felt like another theft. Lily didn't act immediately. She spent weeks researching, consulting with a pro bono lawyer she'd met through the shelter. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel, explained that the foreclosure could be contested if Lily could prove a stake in the property. It was a long shot. Lily's name wasn't on the deed, but Rachel suggested another angle, buying the house at auction if it came to that. The idea was daunting. Lily had savings, but not enough for a house, even one as run down as her mother's. Still, the seed was planted. Lily began to plan, her mind working like the spreadsheets she loved. She calculated her savings, projected her income, and researched the foreclosure process. The house wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of everything Ellen had taken from her. If Lily could claim it, she'd be reclaiming her past, her dignity, her right to exist. She didn't tell Ellen any of this. When her mother called, voice slurred with desperation, Lily kept her answers vague. She wasn't ready to reveal her hand, not yet. But the fire in her grew stronger. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was strategizing. Ellen had underestimated her, but Lily was done being the victim. She would take back what was hers, not out of spite, but because she deserved it. By the end of her internship, Lily had secured a full-time job at the firm. The pay was modest, but it was enough to start building a future. She moved into a better apartment, one with sunlight and space for her books. Her life was taking shape, but the shadow of her mother loomed large. The foreclosure auction was approaching, and Lily was ready to act. She didn't know if she could win, but she knew one thing. She wasn't the girl Ellen had thrown out. She was someone new, someone who fought for what she wanted. The auction day arrived like a storm on the horizon, heavy with anticipation. Lily stood outside the county courthouse, her breath visible in the crisp morning air. The house, her mother's house, her childhood prison, was up for grabs, and she was ready to fight for it. Her savings, combined with a small loan she'd secured through Rachel's guidance, gave her a chance, though not a guarantee. She'd spent weeks preparing, studying the auction process, calculating her limits, and steeling herself for what was to come. Inside, the room buzzed with bidders, investors in sharp suits, locals looking for a bargain, and Lily, a solitary figure in her thrift store blazer, clutching a notepad filled with numbers. When the auctioneer called the address of her mother's house, her heart pounded. She scanned the crowd, half expecting to see Ellen, but her mother wasn't there. It didn't surprise her. Ellen had always run from her problems, leaving others to clean up the mess. The bidding started low, the house's condition dragging down its value. Lily waited, her strategy clear: let the early bids play out, then strike when the momentum slowed. Her hands shook as she raised her paddle, her voice steady but her pulse racing. The numbers climbed, each bid a test of her resolve. She thought of the nights she'd slept on the shelter's cot, the hours spent studying by lamplight, the years of being told she was nothing. This was her moment to prove otherwise. When the gavel fell, Lily's bid stood. She'd won. The house was hers. The reality didn't hit until she stepped outside, the cold air stinging her cheeks. She'd done it not out of greed, but to reclaim a piece of her past, to turn a place of pain into something new. The house was dilapidated, its walls stained with memories, but it was a canvas now, one Lily could paint with her own future. She didn't tell Ellen right away. Instead, she visited the house alone, walking through rooms that felt both familiar and foreign. The kitchen where her mother's rages had erupted, the bedroom where Lily had hidden from the chowsit, was all there. But it didn't own her anymore. She stood in the living room, imagining new paint, new furniture, a new life. This wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. When Ellen finally learned the truth, it was through a letter from the bank, informing her the house had been sold. She called Lily, her voice a mix of shock and accusation. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded. Lily stayed calm, her words measured. "You threw me out, Mom. You called me a parasite. I didn't take anything from you. I earned this." Ellen's silence on the other end was deafening. Lily offered her mother a chance to stay in the house until she found somewhere else. But on one condition: respect. Ellen agreed. But the tension was palpable when she moved back in. Lily set boundaries, refusing to let her mother's chaos seep into her life again. She hired contractors to fix the house, using her savings and her new salary. Each repair was a step toward erasing the past, toward building something that belonged to her. At work, Lily's reputation grew. Her colleagues saw her as a quiet force, someone who got things done without fanfare. She took on bigger clients, her confidence growing with each success. But the house remained her anchor, a project that grounded her. She spent weekends there, sanding floors and painting walls, turning it into a home. Friends from college helped, their laughter filling spaces that had once held only screams. Ellen, meanwhile, struggled to adapt. She wasn't used to Lily's strength, to the daughter who no longer cowered. There were moments of softness, Ellen making coffee, the two of them sitting in silence, but the wounds were deep. Lily didn't hate her mother, but she didn't trust her either. She'd learned to protect her heart, to value herself in a way Ellen never had. By the time the house was fully renovated, it was unrecognizable. Bright walls, new windows, a garden where weeds had once grown. Lily moved in, her belongings sparse but meaningful. The diploma on the wall, a photo of her and Clara, a bookshelf filled with her accounting texts. This was her space, her victory. Ellen left soon after, moving to a small apartment with help from a social worker. Lily didn't ask where she wished her mother well, but she was done carrying her burdens. Life in the house was a new chapter for Lily, one she wrote with care. Each morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd chosen, to walls painted in colors that soothed her soul. The house was more than a building. No, it was a testament to her strength, a place where she could breathe without fear. She furnished it slowly, each piece a reward for her hard work. A sturdy table for dinners with friends, a soft chair for reading, a bed where nightmares no longer lingered. At the firm, Lily's career blossomed. Her supervisor promoted her to junior accountant, a role that came with her own clients and a desk by the window. She tackled complex accounts with the same precision she'd applied to her own life, finding satisfaction in the order of numbers. Her colleagues became friends, inviting her to game nights and barbecues, weaving her into their lives. For the first time, Lily felt like she belonged, not just to a place, but to a community. But the past wasn't entirely gone. Ellen's occasional calls were a reminder of the fragile thread between them. Sometimes, her mother sounded sober, even kind, reminiscing about Lily's childhood with a softness that felt foreign. Other times, the old bitterness crept in, accusations disguised as questions. Lily listened, but she didn't bend. She'd learned to set boundaries, to protect the life she'd built. "I love you, Mom," she'd say, "but I can't fix you." It was a truth that hurt, but it set her free. One evening, as Lily sorted through old boxes in the attic, she found a photo of herself at 5, grinning beside a younger Ellen. Her mother's face was softer then, unlined by the weight of years and regrets. Lily traced the image, wondering where that woman had gone. She didn't shed enough tears, but she felt a quiet sorrow for what could have been. She kept the photo, tucking it into a drawer. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a step toward peace. Lily's life wasn't perfect. There were long days at work. Moments of doubt when the weight of her past felt heavy. But she had tools now, skills. Friends. A sense of self that no one could take away. She volunteered at Clara's shelter on weekends, helping others the way she'd been helped. She shared her story with young women who felt trapped, telling them they were stronger than they knew. Each conversation was a ripple, a way to give back the hope Clara had given her. The house became a gathering place, a hub for the life Lily was building. She hosted dinners, her laughter mingling with her friends. She planted flowers in the garden, their colors a defiance of the weeds that had once choked it. The house was hers, not just in deed but in spirit. It was a place of healing, a symbol of what she'd overcome. Ellen visited once, unannounced. She stood in the doorway, marveling at the changes. "You did this," she said, her voice a mix of awe and something like envy. Lily nodded, offering her mother a seat but no apologies. They talked, not as mother and daughter, but as two people navigating the wreckage of their past. Ellen didn't stay long, and Lily didn't ask her to. Some bridges could only be crossed so far. As the seasons changed, Lily's life settled into a rhythm. She enrolled in a master's program, her sights set on becoming a CPA. She dreamed of opening her own firm one day, a place where she could help others build their futures. The fire that had sparked on that rainy night 2 years ago still burned, but it was steady now, a beacon rather than a blaze. She thought of her mother less often, but when she did, it was with a clarity she hadn't had before. Ellen's words had wounded her, but they'd also pushed her to fight. In a strange way, being called a parasite had been the catalyst for her transformation. It wasn't gratitude, she'd never thank her mother for that pain, but it was acceptance. The past had shaped her, but it didn't own her. 2 years after the auction, Lily stood in her garden, the morning sun warm on her face. The house behind her was alive with color, its walls a canvas of her resilience. She'd just finished a call with a client, her confidence as a junior accountant growing with each success. Her master's program was challenging but exhilarating, each class a step toward her dream of owning a firm. Her life was full, not perfect, but hers. She hadn't heard from Ellen in months. The last call had been brief, Ellen's voice steady but distant. She'd found a job, a small apartment, a semblance of stability. Lily wished her well, but she didn't cling to hope for reconciliation. Some wounds healed best at a distance. She'd learned to love her mother without needing her approval, to forgive without forgetting. The community college invited Lily to speak at a graduation ceremony, a chance to share her story with students like her, those fighting against the odds. She stood at the podium, her voice steady, and told them about the rainy night she'd been cast out, about the shelter that had saved her, about the house she'd reclaimed. "You are not your circumstances," she said, her eyes meeting theirs. "You are what you choose to build from them." The applause was warm, but the real reward was the young woman who approached her afterward, tears in her eyes, saying, "You gave me hope." Lily's house became a haven for others. She opened it to friends, to shelter residents, to anyone who needed a place to feel safe. Clara visited often, her pride in Lily evident in every smile. "You've taken back everything," Clara said one evening, sipping tea in the kitchen. Lily nodded, but she knew it wasn't just about the house or the career. She'd taken back her worth, her voice, her right to exist. One spring morning, Lily received a letter from Ellen. It was short, written in her mother's shaky hand. "I'm proud of you," it read. "I don't deserve to be, but I am." There was no apology, no plea for forgiveness, just those words. Lily read it twice, then tucked it away. She didn't need her mother's Pradesh found her own, but the words were a quiet echo of closure. As she walked through her garden, tending to the flowers she'd planted, Lily felt a peace she hadn't known was possible. The girl who'd stood in the rain, bag in hand, was gone. In her place was a woman who'd built a life from nothing, who'd turned pain into purpose. The house, the job, the friends, they were all pieces of a mosaic she'd crafted, each one a testament to her strength. Lily looked at the horizon, where the sun was rising over Ashwood. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she was ready for it. She'd taken back everything, not just what her mother had, but what she'd always deserved. Her life was her own, and it was enough.